Adversity forms strength. As a blacksmith forges metal, so too did these warriors forge themselves. Into the fires of battle do these heroes dare to tread. Unto the anvil of war did they march without hesitation, without regret, and without mercy. In the flames do they shape their indomitable will as master craftsmen. And war is their craft. They are the hammer and the anvil. They are the burning heart of the Imperium's soul. Not just warriors, not simply champions, but heroes of legend. With fury and righteousness raging with a light in their souls, they stride like giants among battlefields. At the end of their flamers are the unclean purged, the Xenos set aflame, and the enemies of humanity set alight on the pyres of their own ambitions. Tried, tested, true and just, these heroes, these legends stand apart from their brethren and are closer to humanity for their efforts. In their testing, true metal is met with might. In war, they are not simply eradicators, but humanity's greatest protectors, saviors, and guardians. In them is the untold fury of humanity, combined with the compassion of their Primarch. A flame that burns all the harder knowing the toll, the price, the cost of feeling as they do. Do not look to their brethren for salvation. Place your faith, your trust, and your strength in these. Warriors born of fire, hardened by its heat, forged into their truest selves, all weakness burned away. In them is the light of the Emperor, the soul of mankind, and the salvation of humanity. They are the Dragon Warriors, the 18th Legion, the followers of the Creed of Prometheus, the sons of Vulcan, and none can impeach their honor. They are the Salamanders. Welcome one and all. I'm Azazel, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my video detailing the 18th Legion, the Salamanders. They are the few heroes remaining in a grimdark universe, and, like all true heroes in the grimdark universe, perhaps suffer more limitations. No, we aren't mentioning the Lamenters at this point. I also have a personal love for them as they were the first Space Marine models I painted. Although that was because someone gifted me a Battle for Macragge box set, and I ignored the Smurf love and set my mind to painting them in honour of the 18th Legion. I then massacred them with my Tyranids, suitably honouring their sacrifice afterwards. But I digress. Be prepared now. Steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 41st millennium. What is a hero? A warrior who can face down the darkest nightmares that this universe has to offer? A general commanding crusades on a sector-wide scale to hold back the hungry hordes that threaten to ravage our borders? The paladin, incandescent in fury, vanquishing the dark generals of our enemies? These are, more often than not heroes. Great, yes. But heroes? To be a hero requires more. To be knights not just of valor, but of selflessness. One whose heroics stem from the truest of ideals. Ones who seek the right victory, over victory at any cost. One who serves humans, and not humanity as a whole. Humanity is a species-wide term. It is generic, it is sterile, it encompasses the whole without regard to those that make up the entire. The sum of humanity's parts comes from humans. Us, our race's brief, insignificant lives. Those flashes of vitality that make each of us human, not humanity. But of course, all the Imperium's most renowned warriors serve humanity. The Emperor's angels fight along the length and breadth of the galaxy, crushing waves of heretics along the Cicatrix Maledictum, denying the supremacy of the hive mind over Baal, or purging worlds infected with the spores of filthy orcs. But how many can say that they serve humans? To the Ultramarines, their noble veneer is skin deep until the first hurdle, the first battle. The moment their precious theoreticals fail, humans are just a number in a sector-spanning spreadsheet. A resource to be used and cast away, all in the name of the big picture. The Imperial Fists, too, would too readily abandon those who place their faith in them if it meant securing an indomitable beachhead upon which they could break the oncoming storm heading their way. They serve humanity, the game of numbers. Bright, noble champions whose morals aren't worth spit, as long as they win their battles and live to justify their actions. The Space Wolves? Heroes? Perhaps. They've shown to be quite capable of fighting for humans, even so far as taking on the Inquisition. But once your saviors begin to lope along on four legs and grow slavering jaws, the words friend and foe can lose all distinction. But there are heroes. In this grim dark universe of existential horror, there are those whose souls burn with a passion. Champions who fight not just out of loyalty, but out of compassion. True believers in the value of a human life, whose creed is shaped by empathy as much as skill at arms. There are those who will stand their ground against the oncoming tide and pronounce, "Here and no further." Those whose self-sacrifice has been an endless tradition for over 10,000 years. For humans, they are the sword and the shield. It is because of their love for humans that their wrath is unparalleled. What others discount as a weakness becomes their strength. It grounds them, it sustains them, raises them on a pedestal that forges them into something inviolable. They are the Salamanders. First things first, occasionally I do babble and go off on a tangent, so I apologize in advance. I'll try to rein that in through a vicarious mix of proofreading and audio editing out sections later. I'll leave the tendency to deviate from original points to lore-tubers such as Luetin, who does it far better than I ever could. But we are here now, and I should get to the point, so let's begin at the beginning. At a time when the 18th Legion were not known as the Salamanders, when they did not know their Primarch Vulkan, a time when they were kept far from view of the rest of the legions. Let us explore the early days of the Salamanders. Terra, a ravaged planet. Millennia of war had racked the sphere we call our home planet. Territories carved out by the bloodlust of techno-barbarians. Kingdoms forged by psycho-warlords who enslaved millions to their will. Freakish, genetically enhanced monstrosities bearing little resemblance to humanity's baseline strode our planet, acting as soldiers and bodyguards for insane biologists. From that time came the Emperor. He was a beacon. He rallied support from those who met him, crushed those who sought to resist his indomitable will. He would forge humanity's path for us, a united humanity, an empire once more. From the ashes of isolation and disparity, a nation would rise. Our nation. His nation. Across the horizons of Terra, war would rage. Despots denying the righteousness of the Emperor would make futile stands against the armies of humanity and his Thunder Warriors. Piece by piece, he would unite the hellscape that Terra had become. Some fell easily. Some willingly joined the fight, seeing the irrefutable truth that the Emperor was right, or at the very least an unstoppable force they were willing to serve under rather than be crushed. But some would resist even him and his armies. The Caucasus wastes. Mutated, corrupted oligarchs defended their mountain strongholds with ancient technologies. Relics from the depths of humanity's golden age of technology. Unknown, unstoppable, and horrifying. Assaults on them cost the Imperium tens of thousands of Thunder Warriors, and millions of the burgeoning Imperium's armies. It would take something more to defeat them. something more enduring, both in body and spirit, something that would tread where others would not, could not. The Dragon Warriors. For the Caucasus Wastes were one area of Terra left unconquered. It wasn't until beyond the unification of Mars and Terra, when the Emperor brought the Martian priesthood into the fold, that the Caucasus Wastes could fall. During this period, his Space Marines had been developed, and growing in number. 20 legions for 20 Primarchs, their primogenitors lost to the wind and scattered through the warp, were formed, each genetically distinct from the others by virtue of the Emperor's wisdom. Among these were 3 legions set aside, 3 legions chosen to be his trifoil, his aces up his sleeve, deliberately kept distant from the other legions, formed in their own unique ways of war, with the majority of their official existence deleted from record. Among these 3 legions were the 18th. 20,000 legionaries, armed and ready for war. The entire legion locked into a presumed suicide mission. 20,000 genetically enhanced warriors, bred for battle, born for war, would board subterranean vehicles, travel beneath the Caucasus Wastes, and destroy the ancient energy generators beneath the surface. The enemy was unknown, the technology not understood. They faced uncertainty, miles below shifting tectonic plates, through seas of magma, and underground caverns, cut off from the world above. They would face their fate. Only 1,000 of them would return. The Tempest Galleries. Far beneath the light of day, from support from their brethren, from a means of escape, they fought a terrible foe. Automata beyond number. Machine constructs designed to withstand the incredible temperatures and pressures of the subterranean realm. But worse than this, an artificial intelligence, born from the dark age of technology, constructing fresh battle automata to coldly annihilate the interlopers, piece by piece. Armor painted night black and sulfuric yellow, caught in a toxic environment with no hope of escape, and facing down a foe of cold logic and virtually unlimited resources. The 18th did what they did best: survive, endure, overcome. Hours rolled into days, days into weeks. Adapt and survive, evolve and prevail. Weapons were ineffective against the relic automata of the deep. Bolter, Melter, and Plasma were defied by their defensive capabilities. Their only weakness was intense kinetic strikes at vulnerable points. To close the distance to these battle automata would mean death for dozens, yet they did so without hesitation. Through nobility and self-sacrifice for their brethren, they felled the dread machines, salvaged weapons from the fallen AI puppets, collapsed tunnels and laid traps for the mobs of these robotic abominations. Through hardship, through sacrifice, through the fire and flame they came on, eventually laying waste to the abominable intelligence that lay within the deeps of the Tempest Galleries. The Caucasus Wastes were vulnerable. The Emperor and his armies swept across the surface of Terra to snuff out the final point of resistance to his rule. Atop a dormant volcano nearby, a single termite transport returned to the surface. It carried barely 1,000 Marines, the Legion in its entirety. The rest of the 18th lay leagues below the surface, in hollow caverns forgotten by time, surrounded by dread machines of technological nightmare. In fire and darkness were they tested, and they proved themselves worthy. Decimated the Dragon Warriors were, yet stoic, proud, and proven. They had been forged within the anvil of war and came out the stronger for it. Yet, so few in number, the 18th could not function as an expeditionary fleet among the stars. Thus it was that the 18th, while recruiting to replenish their ranks, were split apart among various fleets, to travel with the Great Crusade as additional squads and chapters, rather than a primary legion force. This led to them being unusually suited for a unique purpose among the Great Crusade, for the speed of the expeditionary fleets was a furious one. The pace of each force was driven by the will of the Emperor, of humanity, and soon enough, his rediscovered sons, the Primarchs. This incessant need for speed, for rapid expansion, left holes. Well-secreted Xenos raiders and pockets of resistance that had evaded initial compliance on worlds threatened the safety of newly conquered human settlements. For many of these, legionary forces were required. So it was that the Dragon Warriors, as small pockets of auxiliaries within various expeditionary fleet forces, were assigned these tasks, to be self-sufficient pockets of extreme force, but most drastically, coordinate with the mortal forces that formed the burgeoning Imperium. For many legionaries among the Great Crusade gradually became isolated among their legions. As their numbers began to grow into the hundreds of thousands, they fought, more often than not, as legionary-only assaults. Of course, campaigns were waged simultaneously with human auxiliaries, armor and mechanicum forces, yet on the ground the legionaries fought by themselves. They fought together, bled together, died together, celebrated victories together with their newly formed traditions. They were a sacred fraternity, bonded in bloodshed. Transhuman warriors began the long slide into hubris, and forgot the humanity that they once shared with regular mortals. But the tale of the traitor legions is for another time. The Dragon Warriors, however, were forced to fight with human auxiliaries. Their limited numbers and resources meant that all warfare had to be coordinated and combined with the maximum effective capacity at their disposal. Not only that, but as mortals fell in battle so easily, the Dragon Warriors understood that human lives had to be protected at all costs. Human forces were not just a resource, they were warrior brothers, despite lacking the transhuman advantages that the 18th had. They were humanity's root, binding them to the race that they fought for. They were the Legion's future, as the Dragon Warriors, few in number, needed to replace their lost numbers. So it was that the Dragon Warriors didn't fight simply out of loyalty to humanity, but out of compassion for humans. In them was born the spirit of nobility, of understanding. In them was the best of the Great Crusade's ideals. Reunion with their Primarch. Stars burned. Empires fell. Xenos were rooted out of their dark warrens. Peace and stability for the new human Imperium began to take form. The void was cleared, star systems discovered, and an age undreamed of was ushered in by humanity's crusading fleets. The Dragon Warriors rebuilt, a legion anew, but never as great in number as their cousin legionaries. They were stalwart defenders of humanity, deadly in war, yet great in compassion. Through the stars they crusaded, charging into unsurmountable odds to save civilian populations again and again and again, to the point of lunacy. Rumors spread that the 18th had a death wish, that their suicidal attempts at warfare would bring them to the brink of ruin. But these rumors were told and retold by legionaries that failed to share their compassion, their nobility. The 18th served humans, not humanity. Each human life saved was a victory for the 18th, even if it cost them their own. They understood that their numbers were paltry in comparison, that their methods would likely end with high numbers of casualties, and still they charged in. To defend the weak, to stand against the impossible, to be the heroes that humanity needed of them. Yet, Unbeknownst to them, their father had been found. Upon the death world of Nocturne, a fiery, rocky world utterly inimical to humanity's living conditions, their Primarch Vulkan had been discovered. Utterly unlike his brothers, yet the same. Vulcan would, in time, become a leader of men, a general, a warlord, a legend. Yet so unlike his brother Primarchs, Vulcan knew humanity. The humble blacksmith would undergo an awakening unlike any others as he attended the Emperor's side and learned with him for years. Rather than an immediate reunion with his legion, Vulcan returned to Nocturne, where he would spend years preparing. A new fleet from the technologies of Mars, yet altered by the forges of Nocturne, was raised up. Initiates were drawn from the populace of Nocturne to build up his new legion. Unique traditions and teachings were formed by Vulcan to begin the basis of a new type of warrior, both like and unalike to the other legions. He would prepare until the Emperor called for him. It was in the Terra system that the 18th Legion prepared for death. An enormous orc invasion had swept into the Antaras system, swallowing up worlds in its wake. A tide of bloodlust, cunning, and savagery had smothered planets along the path of its warg. The Dragon Warriors fought with ferocity, with honor. They fought tooth and nail to evacuate the invaded worlds, to retrieve as many civilians as could be saved. Each human life spared, an insult to the orc invaders. A year of bloodied war, of the screams of the dying, of evacuation and retreat. Each battle fought with backward steps as a delaying tactic. Once Corsaira fell, the Terra system was next. There was no other option. The billions of inhabitants of the Terra system could not be evacuated. There was no time, space, or resources to effect an evacuation on that scale. The Dragon Warriors had one option. A final, last stand. The hateful spit in the eye of the enemy. One opportunity to bleed the Orc Warg dry. They did not expect to survive. The goal was to hurt the Orcs, to sap their strength, to put the fear of humanity's finest within their spirits, so that the next forces that fought the Orcs may stand more of a chance. A last charge of the Light Brigade. Antam would be their final resting place. A death world. Toxic and corrosive air from sulfuric plumes gusted about in hurricane winds. Ash turned the planet dark against the flowing magma rivers that burst from active volcano ranges. Upon a mountain of dark ash and volcanic fire, they began their trap. A fortification was raised among the volcanic canopy, a stranger among these peaks of inhuman death. A last defiant stand against both the Orcs and the planet itself. The Orcs would break themselves on the landscape, and against the 18th Legion. The stage was set. All that was left to do was to wait. The end was coming, and the 18th would rage against the dying of the light. The Orcs would not resist the temptation. This foe had bloodied them on the previous worlds. The ships had smuggled away human refugees from the worlds they had conquered. The Greenskins could not leave these warriors to their own devices. Or, knowing the Orcs, perhaps it was just because they couldn't stand some other non-Orcs being so green and so fighty. Perhaps both. The assault on Antam began. The Orcs died in their millions. Some fell as their insufficient technologies broke apart on atmospheric entry. Others, when they landed into fissures in the tectonic plates. Others burned and drowned amidst the vast flows of magma that covered the planet. And still, they came on. Again and again, they launched themselves at the Dragon Warriors' fortifications. Time and again, they were pushed back by the forces arrayed upon the mountain. Dragon Warriors fell in battle, were dragged away for battlefield patch-ups, and set once more on vigil to repel the invaders. The planet itself continued to wrench itself apart in agony, hampering the Orc forces and isolating their warriors amidst flows of molten magma. But the planet did not spare its defenders its ire. Volcanic eruptions damaged the Dragon Warriors and their fortifications. As the Legion Master Cassian Vaughn lay on the brink of death on Antam, Numeon would lead a desperate last-ditch attempt to decimate the Orc hordes. With a small squad armed with immense seismic charges, they would attempt to artificially trigger one of the identified fault lines deep within the landscape. Diving into the subterranean caves of Antam, the Orcs followed them. Only through indomitable will, accuracy, and focus did they successfully trigger a cascade of magma that would tear apart a huge number of the Orc forces. Once on the surface, the surviving Numeon and his two battle brothers witnessed their plan take effect and wipe out the Orcs' stronghold. Yet the Orcs were still great in number. The Dragon Warriors would not win this day, but they could make the Orcs pay in blood for each life they took. Numeon looked on as an enormous Orc chieftain and his forces made their way to annihilate the 3 legionaries who had wreaked such awful hell on their forces. Until a demigod fell from the sky. His Primarch, his Gene Father, had arrived. When all seemed lost, Vulcan had come for his Terran sons. Despite them being born on a planet far from where he had been brought up, they were his sons, and those remaining would not fall this day. New Nocturnian legionaries landed with Vulcan and laid waste to the Orc forces. Little did the Dragon Warriors know that Vulcan and his forces had swept into the system like an avalanche of fire. The fresh fleet had laid waste to the Orcs' ramshackle ships. Vulcan had led a lightning strike into the Orcs' fortress moon with the Termite, the Dragon Warriors' vehicle that had brought the remnants out of the Tempest galleries on Terra so long ago. They had decimated the heart of the Orc fleet before descending upon wings of fire to save the remnants of the 18th Legion. Across ashen wastes, among the glow of volcanic flame, the legions of Terra and Nocturne crushed the Orcs between them. They reunited among the fury of war and sent the remnants of the Warg fleeing to the open plains. Instinctively, the warriors of Terra knelt to their father, their Primarch, their savior. Vulcan bade them rise. He was their father, not their king. Kneeling was a sign of respect, a tribute to be earned. There, in front of his legionaries, he knelt to them, to their sacrifice, to their honored dead. As he rose, the Legion felt the difference. No longer were they alone, nor even 2 separate parts. They were whole, entire. Vulcan gestured to his sons, both Newfound and Nocturnian, and gestured to the fleeing Orcs. Behold the 18th Legion. Behold the furnace. Behold the anvil of war. Behold the flames of rebirth. Hear me, my sons. Hear your name. You are the Fireborn. You are the Salamanders. And so the 18th Legion was henceforth known as the Salamanders, to be humanity's bulwark against the foe, to be the saviors against the impossible, to be the ones who, when all else has fallen, draw a line in the sand and declare, "This far and no further, not one more step." Thank you very much for listening. This was originally designed to be a self-contained piece, however I feel I may have gone a bit overboard, and I still need to cover the Horus Heresy and all that Shattered Legion stuff. So now it will be in 2 parts. For the old hats among you, I hope you enjoyed it. For the newer members of our wonderful hobby, I hope you have begun to appreciate who the Dragon Warriors were, and who the Salamanders will soon become. Anywho, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment something, anything you wish me to touch upon more in the future. Your input is welcome, as, well, without you, no one would be listening. Now, do enjoy your day or night, and I hope you've indulged in some escapism from reality. But that's why we are here, isn't it? Until next time.